I never told my wife I was an undercover cop. To her, I was just her quiet husband. Last night, her mother hit a man. Then they blamed me. My wife shoved the car keys at me. Just tell the police you were driving. Her mother said, I have a career. You have nothing to lose. My wife smirked. Honey, who are the cops going to believe? That was the last mistake they ever made. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The swing set in the backyard creaked twice before dawn, the way it always did when the wind came down off the hills. Adrian Brooks heard it from the kitchen. He stood at the sink with his hands in warm water, watching the gray lights spread across the grass. He had built that swing 4 summers ago from cedar planks and galvanized bolts. He had sanded every edge by hand because Ruby had been 4 years old and small enough to fit her whole body through the gap between the ropes. He had asked Melanie to come outside and see it when he finished. She had looked through the window for about 3 seconds. It's nice, she had said. Then she had gone back to her phone. That was the year he stopped asking her to look at things. 11 years of marriage. That was the number people used when they asked. 11 years sounded solid. It sounded like something with a foundation under it. The truth was that 11 years had become 2 people sharing a house in a quiet suburb outside Belhaven, Oregon, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom with a cracked tile Adrian kept meaning to replace, and a mortgage that swallowed most of what he brought home. The truth was that Melanie had stopped seeing him somewhere around year 6, and he had noticed, and he had said nothing. He pulled the plug and let the water go down. The pipes rattled behind the wall. He dried his hands on the towel hanging from the oven handle and listened to the house. Upstairs, a floorboard shifted. Melanie was awake. Adrian started the coffee. She came down 20 minutes later in a robe, hair pinned back, phone already in her hand. She poured a cup without looking at the pot. She had made that pour 10,000 times. There's a thing at Mom's on Sunday, she said. What kind of thing? A lunch. The Halversons are coming. Adrian leaned against the counter. Do you want me there? Melanie took a drink. She set the cup down. She scrolled with her thumb. You can come, she said. It was not an invitation. It was a permission slip, and it was written in a tone that made clear the permission could be revoked if he made it awkward. I'll be there, Adrian said. Fine. She left the cup on the counter, half full, and went back upstairs. Adrian rinsed it and put it in the rack. He had learned a long time ago that there was no reward for arguing in this house. There was only escalation, and then silence that lasted 4 days, and then a slow return to normal that felt like both of them agreeing to pretend nothing had happened. So he stayed quiet. Melanie thought that was defeat. It was not. Sunday came gray and damp. Constance Avery's house sat on a corner lot with a manicured hedge and a brick walkway that she had installed the year she made senior administrator. Everything about that house announced itself before you reached the door. Constance opened it wearing pearls at 11 in the morning. Melanie, she said, and kissed her daughter's cheek. Then her eyes moved to Adrian, and something in her face adjusted by about 2 degrees. Adrian, you came. I did. Wonderful. She stepped aside to let them pass. The house smelled like rosemary and lemon polish. Ruby ran straight for the back room, where Constance kept a box of old puzzles, and Adrian watched her go, and for a moment the whole day was worth it. The lunch was roast chicken and a green salad and a bottle of wine that Constance mentioned the price of twice. The Halversons talked about a trip to Portugal. Melanie asked questions. Constance refilled glasses and steered the conversation the way a person steers a car. Small corrections, constant pressure. Adrian ate and listened. Then Constance turned to him. And how is the security work, Adrian? Still fixing alarm boxes? Still fixing alarm boxes. That must be steady, at least. It is. Mrs. Halverson smiled politely. It's important work. People don't think about it until something goes wrong. That's true of most things, Adrian said. Constance set down her fork. She looked at him with an expression that people who had never met her would have called warm. You're a nice man, Adrian, she said. But nice doesn't build a future. The table went quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Mr. Halverson coughed and reached for the bread. Melanie did not say a word. She lifted her wine and drank and looked at the far wall. Adrian felt the heat move up the back of his neck. He held it there. He let it sit and cool. Then he picked up his fork. "The chicken's good," he said. Constance smiled like she had won something. She had not. She had only shown him, one more time, exactly what she thought a man was worth when he did not have a title in front of his name. Adrian filed it away. He was very good at filing things away. On the drive home, Ruby fell asleep in the back seat with a puzzle piece still in her fist. Melanie stared out the passenger window at the wet road. "You didn't have to just sit there," she said. "What was I supposed to say?" "Something." She wasn't asking a question. She was making a statement. Melanie shifted in her seat. "Lauren's husband just bought another house. Did you know that? Their second one. On the coast. You mentioned it. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying." The wipers moved. The tires hissed. Melanie waited for him to raise his voice. He did not. She turned back to the window and said, quietly, "You never fight. Would it help?" She did not answer. What Melanie did not know, what she could not have known, was that Adrian's silence was not a personality. It was a discipline. It had been built into him over 2 years of a job he could not name in his own kitchen. For 22 months, Adrian Brooks had been working undercover with a state police task force investigating financial crimes tied to several medical facilities across 3 counties. The security repair work was real. He carried the tools. He fixed the panels. He filed the invoices. That was the point of a cover. It had to be a job you could actually do. It also put him in server rooms, in supply corridors, in loading bays with clipboards on the wall, and cameras that he was authorized to touch. His handler was Detective Nolan Reeves, a man with a gray crew cut and a habit of chewing sunflower seeds when he was thinking. Nolan had briefed him on the first day in a parking structure outside Salem. "You keep it separate," Nolan had said. "Your house is your house. This is this. The day you blur that line, somebody gets hurt, and it probably won't be you." Adrian had accepted the terms. He had accepted a lot of things. But there was one thing he never compromised, one place where the discipline did not reach, and that was Ruby, 8 years old, missing 2 teeth on the bottom, obsessed with sharks, and with a chapter book about a girl who could talk to horses. Every night he checked her homework at the kitchen table, and he did not just sign the folder. He read it. He asked her to explain the math to him even when he already knew the answer, because he had learned that she understood it better after she said it out loud. Every Saturday morning he made pancakes. Ruby cracked the eggs. She was terrible at it. Shell got in the batter almost every week, and Adrian fished it out with a spoon and never once complained. When she had nightmares, he sat on the floor beside her bed with his back against the frame until her breathing evened out. Sometimes that took 40 minutes. Sometimes it took 2 hours. He never left early. Melanie slept through most of it. Constance, when she visited, would look at the drawings taped to the refrigerator and say something about how Ruby needed structure, and how children raised without ambition around them grow up without any. To both of those women, Adrian was the quiet husband, the one who had not amounted to much, the one who fixed alarm boxes and washed dishes and did not argue. They had built a version of him in their heads, and they had lived comfortably inside it for years. They were about to find out how badly they had misjudged the man they were living beside. Belhaven Regional Hospital sat on a hill at the north end of town, for stories of pale brick with a helipad on the roof that had not been used in 6 months. Constance Avery had worked there for 18 years. She had started in billing. She had moved to operations. She had made administrator at 39 and had spent the next decade making herself indispensable, which is a different thing than being liked. People trusted her. That was the important part. She sat on the board of a children's literacy charity. She showed up at the spring fundraiser in a blue dress and gave a 4-minute speech about community. She was quoted twice a year in the Belhaven Register. Adrian had walked past her photograph in the lobby maybe 200 times. Employee recognition wall. 2nd row, 3rd from the left. She was smiling in it. He had never expected her name to come up in a case file. It started with a discrepancy, so small it looked like a typo. In March, Adrian had been servicing the card readers on the 3rd floor supply corridor. While he waited for a system reboot, he had pulled up the delivery log on a terminal, ordinary maintenance access, and something in the numbers had caught on him. A shipment of surgical staplers. Ordered. Signed for. Recorded as received. The storage room they were logged into had been sealed for renovation for 6 weeks. He photographed the screen and said nothing. Over the next 4 months, he found 11 more: arthroscopic shavers, bone anchors, vascular sealing devices, high-value, low-volume equipment. The kind of items that cost thousands of dollars each and get logged individually because they have to be tracked by serial number. Ordered, delivered, vanished. The paperwork was clean. That was what made it good. Somebody had built the whole thing to survive a routine audit. Every form had a signature. Every signature matched a real employee. Every receiving date lined up with a real truck on a real dock. But the equipment was not in the building. Adrian started tracing the approvals backward. Purchase orders had to clear a threshold review. Above $40,000, they needed a second signature from operations. One name kept appearing near the suspicious purchases. Not on them, near them. Constance Avery. The first time he saw it, he sat in his truck in the north lot for 11 minutes without starting the engine. It was raining. The windshield fogged. He watched a nurse run across the lot with a jacket over her head, and he thought very clearly about what this was going to do to his family. Then he drove home and made spaghetti and helped Ruby with a worksheet about the water cycle. He could not tell Melanie. That was not a choice he agonized over for weeks. It was simply the shape of the situation. He could not tell his wife that her mother was under investigation. There was no version of that conversation where the information stopped in that room. Melanie called her mother every day, sometimes twice. She told Constance things Adrian had said in private, and Adrian knew this because Constance would occasionally repeat them back to him with a smile. So he watched instead. He pulled records at 3 in the morning while the house slept. He photographed shipping manifests. He built a timeline in a locked file on an encrypted drive that lived in the toolbox in his truck. He documented conversations. Not hers, not yet. Vendors. A supply clerk named Ellis who talked too much. A dock supervisor who had once mentioned, in passing, that a private courier sometimes came after hours and never signed anything. He followed the money as far as an outside company called Northline Medical Resale, registered in Idaho, with a mailing address that turned out to be a mailbox service in a strip mall. And he waited. That was the part nobody understood about the work. It was not raids and warrants. It was months of being patient while a person you saw at Sunday lunch smiled at you across a roast chicken. There were nights it sat badly with him. He would lie in the dark next to a woman who had not touched him in a year and think about Ruby and about what it would mean for an 8-year-old to learn that her grandmother was going to be arrested. He never once considered walking away from the case. But he thought about it. He was not a machine. Then on a Thursday in October, the investigation stopped being something that lived in his truck and walked directly into his living room. It was just after 7. Ruby was on the floor with her homework spread out on the coffee table. Adrian was on the couch with a cup of tea going cold beside him. Melanie's phone rang in the kitchen. He heard her answer. He heard the tone change. It was not the voice she used with her mother. Her mother's voice was easy, casual, sometimes complaining. This voice was lower. Careful. Now, Melanie said. A pause. No, I can't. Okay. She came into the living room with her keys already in her hand. I'm going to Mom's. Adrian looked up. Everything all right? She wants to talk about something. Do you need me? No. She said it fast. Faster than the question deserved. She grabbed her purse from the hook by the door. Then she stopped, one hand on the frame, and stood there for a second longer than she needed to. Actually, she said, stay with Ruby. Adrian set the cup down. That was strange. Of course he would stay with Ruby. He was already with Ruby. It was 7 o'clock on a school night, and he was sitting 6 feet from her. She had not said it because it needed saying. She had said it because she needed him accounted for. Melanie. She kept her face turned toward the door. What? Are you okay? I'm fine. She left. He heard the car back out. He heard the engine sound fade down the street and stop existing. Ruby did not look up from her worksheet. Where's Mom going? Grandma's. Again. Adrian's phone buzzed against his leg. He turned it over. A message from Nolan, on the secure line, timestamp 7:14. Constance is meeting someone tonight. Don't approach. Observe only. Adrian read it twice. The room was warm. The heater ticked in the hallway. Ruby's pencil scratched against paper, and she made a small, frustrated sound at a subtraction problem. Adrian sat very still and looked at the screen. His wife had just left the house to go to her mother, and her mother was meeting someone that a state task force wanted eyes on the same night, in the same 3-hour window. The wall he had spent 2 years maintaining between his job and his family had just come down. He typed one word, "Understood." Then he put the phone face down on the arm of the couch and slid off onto the floor beside his daughter. "Show me the one that's giving you trouble," he said. Ruby pointed with the eraser. "Okay," Adrian said. "Read it out loud to me." She read it. He listened. His hands were steady. He knew things were about to get worse. He did not yet know how fast. The call came at 10:34. Adrian had just closed Ruby's door. He was standing in the hallway with a nightlight glow coming out from under it when his personal phone lit up in his hand. "Melanie," he answered on the second ring. She was crying. Not the controlled crying he had seen at the end of arguments. This was raw and fast, breath catching in the middle of words. Adrian, Mom had an accident." He was already moving toward the stairs. "Where?" "The old mill road." "Is she hurt?" "No." "Melanie, is she hurt?" "No. She's fine. She's standing up. She's fine." He took the stairs 2 at a time. "What about the other person?" Silence. 3 seconds of it. 4. He could hear wind on her end and something mechanical, a diesel idle. "Melanie, just come." The line went dead. Adrian stood in the kitchen with the phone still against his ear. He called Denise from 2 doors down, who had watched Ruby a dozen times, and she came over in a coat pulled on over pajamas and did not ask any questions when she saw his face. "Go," she said. He went. The old mill road ran east out of town along the creek, 2 lanes with no shoulder and a guardrail that had rusted through in places. It had been the main route to the lumber operation 40 years ago. Now it carried maybe 30 cars a day. There was no reason for Constance Avery to be on it at 10 at night. Adrian saw the lights from half a mile out, red and blue turning through the trees, throwing color across wet leaves. He parked behind a patrol car and got out into cold air that smelled like creek water and burnt rubber. Constance's silver SUV sat angled across most of the westbound lane, front bumper crushed inward on the driver's side. One headlight dark, the other still burning into the trees. A second vehicle, a small blue sedan, had come to rest nose down in the ditch with its rear wheels off the ground. Glass was scattered across 20 feet of asphalt. It caught the emergency lights and threw them back in pieces. A man was on a stretcher near the ambulance. 2 paramedics worked over him. Adrian could see a cervical collar and a blood pressure cuff, and a hand moving weakly at the edge of the blanket. Constance stood near the patrol car with a foil blanket around her shoulders that she clearly did not need. Melanie stood beside her, arms crossed, mascara streaked down one cheek. Adrian walked toward them across the broken glass. Both women turned at the same time. There was something in the way they turned. Together. Rehearsed. "Who was driving?" Adrian said. Constance answered immediately. Adrian was. He stopped walking. The wind moved through the trees above them. The ambulance diesel knocked and settled. "What?" Melanie stepped forward and put her hand on his forearm and squeezed hard enough that he felt her nails through his jacket sleeve. "Just go with it," she said. Adrian looked at her. Really looked. Her hair was stuck to her temple. Her lips were pale. She was frightened, genuinely frightened, and she was asking him to walk into a criminal charge as a favor. "I wasn't here," he said. Constance moved in close. She had a way of doing that in conversation, closing distance so that lowering her voice became intimacy instead of secrecy. "Listen to me. I wasn't driving. Adrian, I was at home, with our daughter. 20 minutes ago, I was reading her a book." Constance's voice went flat. All the warmth she had used at the lunch table drained out of it in a single sentence. And what was underneath was something Adrian had suspected for 11 years and had never been given proof of. "My career is finished if they charge me." There it was. Not is he all right. Not what happened. Not I made a mistake. My career. Melanie fumbled in her coat pocket and came out with the key fob. She pressed it into Adrian's palm and closed his fingers around it with both her hands, the way you would hand someone a gift. "Just tell them you were driving." Adrian let the keys sit in his hand. He did not grip them. He did not drop them. You want me to lie? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Melanie's eyes filled. No, you don't. Do you know what happens to her? 18 years, Adrian. The board, the license, everything. She's 57. She can't start over. And I can. Constance stepped in again. Closer this time. She smelled like wine and rain. You have nothing to lose. Adrian turned his head and looked at her. The foil blanket crackled on her shoulders. Behind her, a state trooper was walking the shoulder with a flashlight and a measuring wheel. Say that again, Adrian said. She said it again, and she embellished it because she thought she was closing a deal. I have spent my entire life building my reputation. 18 years at that hospital. Board seats. Every dollar I raised for that literacy program. You fix alarm boxes, Adrian. You can find another job. There was no cruelty in the way she said it. That was the worst part. She said it the way a person reads out a grocery list. To her, it was simply arithmetic. Her life had value. His did not. The math was obvious. Melanie put her hand on his chest. Honey, she whispered, who are the police going to believe? That sentence went into him and stopped. Not because it hurt. He had absorbed worse in that family, across dinner tables and car rides, in the silence after he said something and nobody responded. It stopped because it was information. Who are the police going to believe? That was not the question of a woman in a panic. A panicking person says, help me, or I'm scared, or I don't know what to do. A panicking person does not perform a threat assessment. Melanie had already run the numbers. She had looked at her husband and her mother and calculated whose word would survive contact with an investigation. And she had decided his would not, and she was telling him so, kindly, with her hand on his chest, like it was a comfort. They were not confused. They were not panicking. They had made a decision somewhere in the 40 minutes before he arrived, and they had made it together. And the decision was that Adrian Brooks's freedom was worth less than Constance Avery's reputation. Adrian looked down at the keys in his hand. The fob had a scratch across the plastic. He had noticed it once before at a gas station and had thought about nothing at all. Somewhere behind him, one of the paramedics said a number out loud to the other. A gurney wheel locked. Adrian ran the whole thing forward in about 6 seconds. If he refused now, on this road, in the dark, there would be 2 of them and 1 of him. 2 statements against his. They would say he had been driving and had run. They would say he was unstable, that the marriage was failing, that he had been angry. It would become a mess of he said, and the physical evidence would take weeks to sort out, if it ever did. And Nolan's file would still be sitting incomplete. If he agreed, he would be handing them exactly what they were asking for. And they would keep talking. People who think they have won always keep talking. Adrian slid his free hand into his jacket pocket. His thumb found the phone. He found the edge of the screen by feel, the way he had practiced with a device in his pocket in a parking structure in Salem 11 months earlier, while Nolan chewed sunflower seeds and timed him. He pressed once. The recorder started. He kept his hand in his pocket. He let 5 full seconds go by. Say it one more time, he said. What you want me to do? Melanie's shoulders dropped in relief. Tell them you were behind the wheel. That's all. That's it. And you'll back that up? Both of you. Yes, Constance said. Of course. You were the passenger. I was the passenger. Adrian nodded slowly once. Then he quietly said, okay. Melanie exhaled. Her whole body loosened. She actually laughed, a small wet sound, and pressed her forehead briefly against his shoulder. Constance closed her eyes and breathed out through her nose. Thank you, Melanie said. Thank you, thank you. Adrian did not put his arm around her. Neither woman noticed his hand was still in his pocket. Neither of them noticed that he had asked 3 questions he already knew the answers to. Over by the ambulance, the injured man turned his head. For half a second his eyes found Adrian's across 40 feet of wet road. Then a paramedic leaned in and blocked the line of sight, and the doors closed, and the ambulance pulled out toward the highway. Adrian watched it go. He did not know the man's name yet. In 4 weeks, it would be the most important name in the case. The trooper's name was Whitaker. He was maybe 30, with a notebook he actually wrote in instead of typing on a tablet, and he had the patient, unhurried manner of a man who had done this many times and expected to do it many more. He took Adrian to the back of the patrol car, not inside it, just to the trunk, out of the wind. You were operating the vehicle? Yes. Speed? I couldn't say exactly. Best estimate. Under 40. Whitaker wrote. What happened? Adrian looked past him at the wreck. The other car came around the bend. I came left. There was contact. Which direction were you traveling? West. Where had you come from? A small pause. Not a hesitation. A choice. I'd been out. Whitaker looked up. Out where? Driving. The trooper's pen stopped for a second, then kept moving. Adrian did not decorate it. He did not invent a deer in the road or a phone call or a coffee cup that spilled. He gave them the skeleton Constance had demanded and not 1 ounce of flesh. That was deliberate. A false statement with details in it becomes a trap you build for yourself. Every detail is a thing that can be checked and contradicted. A false statement with no details is just a bad statement, and a bad statement can be walked back. He had been trained by people who knew the difference. Any alcohol tonight, Mr. Brooks? No. You willing to test? Yes. He blew a clean 0, which he had known he would, and which put a small crease of confusion between Whitaker's eyebrows that Adrian noticed and did not comment on. I'm going to be honest with you, Whitaker said, closing the notebook. There's going to be follow-up. Injury collision, we reconstruct. You'll hear from an investigator. I understand. Don't leave the county. I won't. They let him go at 1:20 in the morning. Melanie drove them home in her own car. Constance had already been taken by a friend. Nobody spoke for the first 10 minutes. Then Melanie said, You were good? Adrian watched the yellow line. You were really good, she said. You didn't seem nervous at all. No. Mom's going to be okay. Good for her. Melanie glanced over. She was still riding the tail end of the adrenaline, and she wanted something from him, some acknowledgement that they had come through a crisis together. He gave her nothing. At home, Denise left with a squeeze of his arm and a promise to check in. The house was too warm and smelled like the cinnamon candle Melanie kept on the mantel. Melanie hung her coat and turned around and hugged him. It was the first time she had put her arms around him in 8 months. He could count it. He had counted it. Thank you, she said into his shoulder. Adrian did not lift his arms. She stayed there a second longer, then felt it and stepped back. What? You asked me to take responsibility for something I didn't do. Adrian, you put a criminal charge in my hand, and you thanked me for taking it. Melanie's face changed. The gratitude went out of it and something more familiar came in, the tightness around the mouth, the small lift of the chin. My mother could lose everything. So could I. You'll be fine. There was again 2 words, delivered with total confidence, like a weather report. You'll be fine. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Do you know what the charge is? He said. For an injury collision where the driver gives a false account? Do you know what the sentencing range looks like? Have you looked it up? Has your mother? You're being dramatic. I'm asking a question. He wasn't badly hurt. They said he wasn't badly hurt. They said he was breathing. Those are different things. Melanie put her hands flat on the counter and looked down at them. It's done, she said. It's over. Can we just be done with it? And that was when Adrian understood something that he would think about many times in the following weeks. She was not being cruel in that moment. She actually believed it. She believed that a statement given to a state trooper at midnight was a thing you could set down and walk away from. She believed his life would simply resume on Monday morning, that he would go fix alarm boxes and come home and make pancakes on Saturday, and that in a year they would not talk about it. She believed he would forgive her, not because she had asked, because he always had. 11 years of him absorbing things had taught her that he was a surface things bounced off of. She had no idea she was standing in front of a man who had spent 22 months building cases against people for a living, who knew exactly what a recording was worth, and who had already decided, on a wet road 2 hours earlier, that this marriage was finished. Go to bed, Adrian said. Are you angry? Go to bed, Melanie. She went. Adrian stood in the kitchen and listened to the water run upstairs. Then he went out to the truck, sat in the driver's seat with the door closed, and pulled up the audio file. 7 minutes and 41 seconds. He played it once, all the way through, with the phone held near his ear and the rain starting again on the windshield. Constance came through clearly. My career is finished if they charge me. You have nothing to lose. You can find another job. Melanie came through too. Just tell them you were driving. Who are the police going to believe? Adrian listened to his wife's voice ask that question, and he watched a drop of water crawl down the glass, and he felt the last piece of something in his chest quietly close. He backed the file up in 3 places. Then he went inside and slept 4 hours on the couch. She waited 3 days. Adrian came in from a job on Friday afternoon with grease on his knuckles and found Melanie sitting at the dining table with a folder in front of her. The house was very clean. She always cleaned before hard conversations. "Sit down," she said. He washed his hands first. He took his time about it. Then he sat. "I want a divorce." Adrian nodded. That was all. One nod. It seemed to throw her. She had built up to it, and there was nothing to push against. "That's it? You're not going to say anything?" "I'm listening. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Her name is Priya Raval. She's in Belhaven. She does family law." Melanie opened the folder and closed it again without taking anything out. "I met with her Wednesday. 36 hours after the accident." "Why?" Adrian said. "Why what? Why now?" Melanie's jaw set. "Because I can't stay married to someone who keeps secrets." Adrian almost smiled. He did not, but it came very close to the surface, and something must have shown, because Melanie's eyes narrowed. "You mean the secrets you don't know about," he said. "What is that supposed to mean?" "You said it, not me. You can't stay married to someone who keeps secrets. 3 days ago you asked me to lie to the state police. So I'm trying to understand which secrets are the problem." "You always do this." "Do what?" "Act like you're better than everyone." She stood up, chair legs scraping tile. "Like you're above it. Like you're the only adult in the room, and the rest of us are children." "I've never said that. You don't have to. It's in your face. It's in the way you go quiet." Her voice climbed. "Do you know what it's like, living with someone who won't fight? Who just stands there and lets you be the ugly one?" Adrian let that hang. "You wanted me to fight," he said. "I wanted you to care. I cared about Ruby." "You cared about Ruby?" Melanie laughed, short and hard. "That's your whole answer for everything. It's the only part of this house I could keep clean." She went upstairs. He heard the closet, the suitcase, the drawers. It took her 40 minutes. He sat at the table the whole time with his hands folded. When she came down, the suitcase was too full to zip properly, and she had a second bag over her shoulder. She set them by the door. Then she said, "I'm taking Ruby." Adrian stood up. Everything in his face changed. Not dramatically. It was smaller than that, and worse. The neutrality went out of it. What was left was something Melanie had never seen in 11 years, and she took half a step back before she was aware of doing it. "No." She recovered. "Excuse me? You can leave. Adrian, you can take the car. You can take whatever's in this house you want. Take the furniture. Take the accounts." He came around the end of the table. "Ruby stays." "That's not how it works." "No. You can't just decide that. Neither can you." Melanie's hand tightened on the strap of her bag, and then her expression shifted into something almost like pity, and Adrian knew exactly what was coming, and he let her say it because he wanted to hear how she would phrase it. "You'll never win custody." "Why?" "Because you admitted you were driving." The refrigerator hummed. Outside, someone's dog barked twice. Adrian said nothing. Melanie smiled. It was small, and it was sad, and it was completely certain. "You see? You're trapped. There's a report with your name on it. There's an injured man in a hospital. What judge is going to look at that and hand you a child?" She shook her head slowly. "I didn't want it to be like this. But you did that to yourself. I did that to myself." Adrian looked at her for a long 5 seconds. He thought about the fob pressed into his palm. He thought about her nails through his sleeve. Then he said, "You should be careful what you put in writing." Melanie blinked. "What?" "Nothing. Drive safe." She stared at him, waiting for the rest of it, and there was no rest of it, and that unsettled her more than a shouted threat would have. "You're being weird," she said. She picked up the bags and left. Ruby was at a friend's house for a birthday party. Adrian picked her up at 6. He told her, in the truck in the parking lot, before they drove home, because he was not going to let her walk into an empty closet and figure it out alone. "Mom's going to stay at Grandma's for a while." Ruby was quiet. She had a party favor bag in her lap, and she folded the top of it over and over again. "Is she coming back?" "I don't think so." "Did you have a fight?" "Something like that." Is it because of me? Adrian turned in the seat, so he was facing her fully. Ruby, look at me. He waited until she did. There is nothing you did. There is nothing you could ever do. This is between the adults, and it has nothing to do with you. Do you understand me? She nodded, but her chin was shaking. He unclipped his belt and reached back and held her hand across the console for a while. A car pulled in beside them and pulled out again. Adrian did not move until she was done. That night, at 11:48, his phone lit up on the nightstand. A message from Melanie. I told Mom I'd protect her. I'm not going to let you ruin her life. Adrian sat up in the dark and read it 4 times. Then he took a screenshot, backed it up, and started a new folder. He saved every message after that. Every one. He did not answer most of them. He did not bait her, because a baited message is worth less when a judge reads it. And he intended for a judge to read all of them. She sent 41 over the next 3 weeks. She was not careful. Constance moved fast. She had spent 18 years learning how institutions worked, and a family is an institution. It has stakeholders. It has a story about itself. Whoever tells the story first usually keeps it. She started calling on Sunday. By Tuesday, Adrian had 11 missed calls and a voicemail from his own sister. He called Gwen back on his lunch break, sitting in the truck outside a dental clinic in Ridgemont with a sandwich he had not opened. Why would you do this to Melanie's mother? Gwen said before hello. Do what? The accident, Adrian. Constance called me crying. She said you've been under strain. She said you've been acting strange for months, and now you're refusing to take responsibility and you're threatening to drag her into it. Is that what she said? Is it true? Adrian watched a woman walk a small dog past the clinic entrance. What do you think? He said. I don't know what to think. I think you've been strange. You never call. You don't come to anything. Mom's birthday. You sat in the corner all night. I was working. You fix alarms, Adrian. There was a version of this conversation where he told her 6 words, and it would have been over. Gwen would have cried and apologized and been on his side for the rest of his life. Nolan's voice in a parking structure. The day you blur that line, somebody gets hurt. I have to go, Adrian said. That's it? That's your answer. That's my answer. He hung up. His Uncle Ray called that night and did not bother with a question at all. Just accept responsibility and move on. That's all anybody's asking. You dig your heels in, you make it 10 times worse for everyone. Good night, Ray. The neighbors were quieter about it, and somehow that was worse. The Kellermans across the street stopped waving. At the grocery store, a woman Adrian had known for 6 years turned down a different aisle. Denise, who had come over in her pajamas without asking a single question, came over again and stood in his kitchen and said, carefully, people are saying things. I know. Do you want to tell me? I can't. She studied him. Can't or won't? Both. Denise picked up her keys. At the door, she stopped. I've watched you with that kid for 4 years, she said. Whatever they're saying, I'm not buying it. It was the first kind thing anyone outside his own house had said to him in 10 days, and it landed harder than he expected. He had to stand at the sink for a minute after she left. He did not defend himself. Not to Gwen, not to Ray, not to the neighbors. Every instinct he had said to open his mouth. He kept it closed. There is a moment in a case where a defense given too early simply teaches the other side where the evidence is, and Adrian was not going to hand Constance Avery a map. So he let them talk. He focused on the only thing that mattered. At school pickup on Thursday, Ruby came out of the double doors at a run, backpack bouncing. Dad, Adrian caught her. How was school? Good. We did a thing about volcanoes and Jordan threw up. Not from the volcano, I hope. No, he had a stomach thing. They walked toward the truck. Then Ruby's steps got slower, and Adrian felt it before she said anything. Dad, yeah. Mom says you're in trouble. Adrian stopped and crouched down on the sidewalk, so they were level. A bus pulled away behind them, and the air smelled like exhaust and wet pavement. Adults sometimes say things when they're scared, he said. Ruby looked at her shoes. Then she looked up, and her eyes were serious in a way that no 8-year-old's eyes should have to be. Did you hurt Grandma? Adrian shook his head. No. He did not add anything to it. He did not explain, or plead, or run down a list of reasons. He gave her one word and let her decide what it was worth. Ruby nodded. I knew you didn't. Something in Adrian's chest cracked open and closed again in the space of a second. He kissed her forehead. His hand was on the back of her neck, and he could feel how small she was. I'm going to make sure you're okay, he said. Whatever happens. That's my job. Not fixing alarms. That's my job. Okay. Get in the truck. There's a granola bar in the glove box. That night, after she was asleep, Adrian drove 40 minutes to a diner off the interstate where the coffee was bad and nobody from Belhaven ever ate. Nolan Reeves was in the back booth with a folder and a paper cup. Adrian slid in across from him. You listened to it? 4 times. Nolan pushed his cup aside. I'll tell you what I told the lieutenant. Constance Avery says the words my career is finished if they charge me. And then 2 minutes later she tells you that you have nothing to lose. That's consciousness of guilt with a bow on it. Is it admissible? Oregon's one-party consent for a face-to-face conversation where you announce it. And it gets complicated, but you were an officer conducting an investigation and you documented it in your law within the hour. The DA's happy. We can prove they pressured you. And the accident itself? Nolan's face did something Adrian did not like. We're still building it. Still building it. The reconstruction units got the scene data. Impact angles, crush profile, all of it. But right now the only sworn statement about who was behind that wheel is yours. And it says you. Nolan leaned forward. You understand the position that puts you in? Until we break that, you are the driver. On paper, you are the driver. I know. Adrian, there's a custody hearing coming. I know. You could have walked away from that road, and they'd have said I ran. Nolan sat back. He did not disagree. Adrian reached into his jacket and put his second file on the table. It was thicker than the first, held closed with 2 rubber bands. I found something. Nolan pulled off the bands and opened it. Inside were 40 pages. Purchase orders with the threshold review signatures highlighted. A spreadsheet Adrian had built by hand cross-referencing serial numbers against a resale listing site. Photographs of an empty storage room with a renovation notice taped to the door and a delivery log showing 11 items received into it. And at the back, 3 pages on Northline Medical Resale, including a scan of an Idaho registration with an officer's name on it that was not Constance Avery's, but which belonged to a man who had been her assistant at Belhaven Regional for 6 years. Nolan turned pages for a long time without speaking. The waitress came and went. Finally, he looked up. She wasn't just hiding the accident. No. Adrian's voice was flat and cold and completely level. She was hiding everything. Nolan closed the folder and put his hand flat on top of it. You know what happens if this holds up? It's not a fine. It's not a resignation. I know. That's your daughter's grandmother. Adrian looked out the window at the empty lot, at the sodium light over the gas pumps, at his own reflection sitting in the glass. She had a chance, he said, standing on that road. All she had to do was tell the truth to a trooper about a car. She looked at me, and she decided I was the cheaper option. He picked up his coffee. I'm not going to save her from what she built. The custody hearing was held on a gray Tuesday morning in a third-floor courtroom of the Belhaven County Courthouse, a building with radiators that knocked and windows that had been painted shut sometime in the 1970s. Adrian arrived at 8:15 for a 9 o'clock docket. He wore a charcoal suit he had bought for a funeral 4 years earlier. He had shined his own shoes at the kitchen table the night before while Ruby did a word search across from him. He sat on a bench in the hallway and did not look at his phone. At 8:40, Melanie came up the stairs with Constance beside her. They were dressed for a verdict they had already received. Melanie in navy, hair down, a soft cardigan chosen to read as gentle. Constance in charcoal wool with a small gold pin on the lapel, the kind of outfit that has authority stitched into the seams. They walked past Adrian without breaking stride. Constance's eyes went over him once, top to bottom, the way you check a room for a chair you might need later. Melanie's lawyer, Priya Raval, met them at the door with a leather folder and a handshake for each. Adrian's attorney arrived at 8:52. His name was Douglas Whitfield. He was 61, and he had a coffee stain on his cuff that he had not noticed. You still want to do it this way? Whitfield said. Yes. They're going to swing hard in the first 10 minutes. Let them. Whitfield exhaled through his nose. It's your daughter. I'm aware. The courtroom smelled like old paper and floor wax. The judge was a woman named Eileen Sorensen, mid-50s, reading glasses on a chain, with the specific weariness of someone who has heard several thousand people explain why they should be believed. Ravel opened. She was good. Adrian gave her that. She did not shout. She built. Your Honor, on the night of October 9th, the respondent was involved in a collision on Mill Road resulting in serious injury to another motorist. The respondent gave a sworn statement to Oregon State Police that he was operating the vehicle. That investigation is open. Criminal exposure is pending. She let that settle. We are not here to try that case. We are here to ask a simpler question. Is a household under that shadow the appropriate primary residence for an 8-year-old child? She talked about instability. She talked about a marriage the respondent had allowed to deteriorate through withdrawal. She used the word irresponsible twice and never raised her voice once. Adrian sat with his hands loose on the table and listened to a woman describe a version of him that had been constructed entirely out of a favor he had done for the people sitting across the aisle. Then Melanie took the stand. She cried within 90 seconds. I've tried, she said. I've tried for years to hold it together. But my daughter needs stability. She needs to know that when she comes home, the house isn't going to fall apart. Adrian watched her. He knew that crying. He had seen it in kitchens and at holiday tables and once at a school fundraiser when a volunteer schedule did not go her way. There was a rhythm to it, a small pause after each sentence where she checked the room. Every tear was aimed. Ruby loves her father, Melanie said, dabbing under one eye. I would never take that from her. I just want her to be safe. Ravel sat down. Judge Sorensen looked over her glasses at the respondent's table. Mr. Brooks, you gave a statement to the state police on October 9th in which you identified yourself as the driver. Do you deny being the driver? The room went still. Adrian stood. He looked to his left. Melanie, on the stand, with the tissue still at her cheek. Then Constance, first row behind the petitioner's table, ankles crossed, one hand resting on the other. Then back at the judge. I deny it. The courtroom did not gasp. It did something quieter and much heavier. The clerk stopped typing. A man in the gallery shifted, and his coat made a sound. Melanie's face came apart in stages. Confusion first, then something closer to fear. Ravel was on her feet. Your Honor, the respondent previously admitted, under questioning at the scene, I was pressured into making that statement, Adrian said. Objection. This is a collateral matter, and the respondent is attempting to. Constance stood up in the gallery. This is ridiculous. Judge Sorensen did not even look at her. Ma'am, sit down. Your Honor, I was there. I can tell you exactly. Sit down or you will be removed. Constance sat. It was the first time in 11 years that Adrian had seen someone tell that woman no and make it stick. Whitfield rose slowly and buttoned his jacket. Your Honor, the petitioner has placed the October 9th statement at the center of this application. It goes directly to my client's fitness. We're entitled to address its origin. I have an audio exhibit. Objection. The recording was made by my client at the scene, contemporaneous, and was logged with the Oregon State Police within the hour. Chain of custody is documented. It has been provided in discovery. Ravel's head turned toward her own client. Melanie, still on the stand, had gone the color of the paper on the clerk's desk. Ms. Ravel, the judge said, were you aware of this exhibit? A pause that lasted a beat too long. It was in the disclosure, Your Honor. Then I'll hear it. They played it on a laptop wired to a speaker on the clerk's bench, and for the first 30 seconds, there was only wind and a diesel engine and the scrape of shoes on gravel. Then Adrian's voice, calm and distant. Say it one more time. What you want me to do? And then Melanie's, close to the microphone, unmistakable. Tell them you were behind the wheel. That's all. That's it. A woman in the gallery put her hand over her mouth. The recording ran back. Adrian had asked Whitfield to play the whole thing from the beginning, not the highlights. He wanted the sequence the way it built. Constance's voice filled the courtroom, clipped and cold and completely certain of itself. My career is finished if they charge me. Then, 40 seconds later, you have nothing to lose. And then the full version, the one she had embellished because she thought she was closing a deal. 18 years at that hospital. Board seats. You fix alarm boxes, Adrian. You can find another job. Judge Sorensen took her glasses off. Melanie was crying again, and it was nothing like the crying from 10 minutes earlier. This was ugly and unplanned, and she was not checking the room at all. This doesn't prove anything, she said. That's not. Everyone was upset. Adrian did not react. He did not turn to look at her. He sat with his hands folded and his eyes forward, and later Whitfield would tell him that the stillness had done more damage than any statement could have. Mr. Whitfield, the judge said. Is there more? There is, Your Honor. The next exhibit was video. An ODOT traffic camera at the Mill Road Junction, mounted for a culvert project running on a 30-day loop that had been pulled on day 26. Timestamp 10:11 p.m. Grainy, black and white, but clear enough. A silver SUV passing under the pole. One occupant. In the driver's seat, a woman with light hair pinned back. Then the second clip, a security camera on the corner of a farm equipment dealership 400 yards past the bend, angled at its own gate but catching a wedge of road. Timestamp 10:29. The SUV stopped at an angle, headlight cone across the trees, and a figure climbing down out of the driver's side door and walking around the front of the vehicle, alone. 6 full minutes before Adrian Brooks's truck ever turned onto that road. Ravel sat down without being told to. Then came the hospital records. Whitfield entered them as a certified exhibit, and at the same moment the courtroom door at the back opened, and a man in a dark suit came in carrying a banker's box and set it on the corner of the clerk's table. He introduced himself as an assistant district attorney for Belhaven County. Judge Sorensen looked at the box, then at Constance Avery, who had gone very upright in her seat. Counsel, the judge said, approach. Everything changed. It came out over the next 40 minutes in the flat, unhurried language of a prosecutor reading from a summary. Constance Avery's collision on Mill Road had not been an accident in the way that word is normally used. The injured man was Darren Pike, 44 years old, a compliance officer in the purchasing department at Belhaven Regional Hospital. For 6 weeks before that night, Darren Pike had been quietly assembling a report. He had noticed what Adrian had noticed from a different direction, not the empty storage room, the serial numbers. He had run 22 of them against public resale listings and found 9 matches, and he had documented every one. And he had scheduled a meeting with the hospital's outside counsel for Friday, October 10th. On Wednesday, October 8th, he had made a mistake. He had gone to Constance Avery first. He had gone to her because she was the administrator, because he had worked under her for 4 years, because he liked her, and because he wanted to give her the chance to bring it forward herself. The prosecutor read the timeline into the record. Thursday, 6:52 p.m. Constance Avery calls her daughter and asks her to come over. Thursday, 8:40 p.m. Constance Avery calls Darren Pike and asks him to meet her, away from the hospital, to talk privately. Thursday, 10:11 p.m. The SUV passes the Mill Road camera. One occupant. Thursday, approximately 10:20 p.m. The collision. Adrian listened with his hands flat on the table. He had known the shape of it. He had not known the middle of it, and the middle of it was worse than he had let himself imagine. There had been a confrontation on that road. Pike's car had turned to leave. What happened after that was still being reconstructed, and the prosecutor was careful to say so and used the word alleged in every sentence where it belonged. But Darren Pike had survived, and before they loaded him into the ambulance, while a paramedic named Tobias Grant was cutting his sleeve for an 4-line, Darren Pike had said 6 words that had been written on a run sheet at 10:47 p.m. and had sat in a filing system for 4 weeks until somebody thought to pull it. Constance Avery was driving the car. The paramedic had documented it, because paramedics document everything. Nobody had asked him about it because nobody had needed to. There had already been a driver. A man had stood on that road and said it was him. The pieces locked together in front of the whole courtroom. The missing equipment. The Idaho Shell Company. The compliance officer who found it. The meeting on a dark road. The collision. The frame. And a daughter who had been called over at 6:52 p.m. before any of it happened, and who had spent the following weeks telling relatives that her husband was unstable. The prosecutor stated that Constance Avery would be facing multiple charges, including counts related to the theft scheme and to the events on Mill Road, and that a separate matter was under review regarding the false statement obtained from Adrian Brooks. Melanie turned in her seat toward her mother. "You told me this would go away." Constance stared straight ahead. "I never told you to lie." The color left Melanie's face entirely. "You told me Adrian would take the blame. I said he should." "You knew." Melanie's voice rose and cracked. "You knew what you were asking me to do. You sat in my car, and you told me exactly what to say to him." Constance's head snapped around. "Don't put this on me. You're my mother, and you're a grown woman who made her own choices. Don't you dare stand there and pretend I held a gun to your head." The bailiff moved a step closer to the rail. It was over in 10 seconds, and it was the most honest 10 seconds either woman had spent in that room. The family that had spent 6 weeks perfectly united against Adrian Brooks came apart in front of a county judge, and there was nothing to hold it together, because there had never been anything under it except a shared agreement about who was expendable. Adrian sat silently. He did not smile. He did not lean over and say anything to Whitfield. He did not turn around to see the faces in the gallery, some of which belonged to people who had stopped waving at him in the street. He felt no rush of victory. He had expected to. He had thought about this moment on long drives, and in the truck outside the hospital, and lying awake listening to the heater tick. What he actually felt was something quieter and much more permanent. He watched 2 people who had tried to hand him a prison sentence turn on each other, and he understood that he had not done this to them. He had simply stopped standing in front of it. For 11 years, he had absorbed everything in that family. He had been the shock absorber. He had taken the comments and the coldness and the small daily humiliations, and he had let them stop at his own skin so that nobody else had to feel them. The night he lowered his hands, the whole thing collapsed under its own weight. That was all it had ever needed. The last piece arrived at 11:20. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened again, and Detective Nolan Reeves walked up the center aisle in a gray suit with a folder under his arm. Melanie's head came up. She knew that face. She had seen it in a hallway at the state police office in the week after the accident, standing near a water cooler while she waited to give her own statement. She had assumed he was there about the collision. She turned to her husband. "Who is he?" Adrian did not answer. Nolan identified himself for the record. He handed a sealed document up to the bench, and a copy across to Ravel, and a copy to the assistant district attorney. Judge Sorensen read it. She read it twice. Then she took off her glasses and set them down and looked at the man at the respondent's table with an expression that had shifted entirely. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "or should I address you differently?" "Brooks is fine, Your Honor." The document confirmed that Adrian Brooks had been operating in an undercover capacity with the State Financial Crimes Task Force since January of the previous year, that his employment as a security systems technician was a maintained cover, and that his conduct on the night of October 9th had been reported to his handling officer within 60 minutes and logged accordingly. Melanie stared at him. She had gone completely still, and when she finally spoke, her voice came out thin. "You lied to me." Adrian turned in his chair and faced her fully for the first time all morning. "My job required me to." "For how long?" 2 years. 2. She put a hand on the rail. "You've been a police officer this whole time?" "Yes. Every day. Every single day in our house. At the table. At Christmas." "Yes." She shook her head slowly, over and over, like a person trying to shake water out of an ear. Behind her, Constance had turned around, and there was no composure left in her face at all. The pin, the wool, the 18 years, none of it was holding. "You set us up," she said. Adrian looked at her. His expression did not change. He had not raised his voice once in that courtroom, and he did not raise it now. "No." He let a pause sit there. "I was standing in my own living room on a Thursday night helping my daughter with subtraction. You called your daughter over. You called Darren Pike out to a road. I didn't put any of you there. You recorded us. You gave me something worth recording. You could have said something. On that road. You could have told us who you were, and none of this. You made your choices." Constance's mouth opened, and nothing came out. Melanie was crying again. She reached one hand a few inches across the rail toward him and stopped. "You could have told me," she said. "I'm your wife. You could have trusted me with it." Adrian looked directly at her. You'd have told your mother inside a week. That's not. You told her what I said about your sister's wedding. You told her what I said about the mortgage. You told her about the argument we had in March, and she quoted it back to me at her own dinner table. He kept his voice completely level. There was never a version of this where I could tell you. So I'm the problem. No. Adrian stood. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. You're not the problem, Melanie. Here's the problem. He looked at her, and the last of it came out flat and simple and without any heat in it at all. I lied to protect a case. You lied to send me to prison. Melanie's hand came off the rail. And you still chose to do it, he said. Knowing me, knowing every part of me, you stood on that road and you chose. She had nothing. The judge called a recess. That ended the argument. Constance Avery was placed on administrative leave the following Monday and lost her position at Belhaven Regional 11 days after that. The investigation went back 6 years. It exposed a pattern of procurement fraud running to just under $1.4 million, involving a former assistant, an Idaho resale company, and a signature threshold she had personally helped design. She faced criminal charges related to the theft scheme and to the events on Mill Road. Her reputation did not decline. It vanished. The literacy charity removed her from the board by email. The Register ran her photograph on the front page, the same photograph from the employee recognition wall, and somebody at the hospital took the original down from the lobby that same week. People who had once introduced her at fundraisers stopped returning her calls. The Halversons sold their house and moved to Bend. At the grocery store, women who had known her for 2 decades found different aisles, and Adrian, who had experienced exactly the same thing 3 months earlier for exactly the opposite reason, did not feel one thing about it. Melanie's situation was different. She was not charged in connection with the collision. She had not been on that road when it happened, and the prosecutor made a judgment call that a woman who arrived after the fact was not the case they wanted to build. But her deliberate attempt to pressure her husband into accepting criminal responsibility became the center of the custody proceeding. It was all in writing. 41 messages. Adrian had saved every one, and Whitfield entered them in a bound exhibit with the dates on the tabs. I told Mom I'd protect her. I'm not going to let you ruin her life. You already admitted it, so stop pretending. Judge Sorensen wrote in her findings that the petitioner had placed her mother's interests above her child's welfare and above the basic honesty required of a parent in proceedings before the court, and that she had provided testimony that was contradicted by physical evidence. Adrian received primary custody of Ruby. Melanie was granted limited supervised visitation to be reviewed after 12 months, conditional on completing court-ordered counseling and a parenting program. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday in March. Afterward, Melanie asked to speak with him privately. They sat across from each other in a small conference room off the second-floor hallway, a table, 4 chairs, a radiator under the window that clicked twice and went quiet. She looked tired. Not the performed exhaustion she used to bring to arguments. Actually tired, in her face and her shoulders and the way she held her hands. I made a mistake, she said. Adrian said nothing. She waited. When nothing came, she pushed on. I've been into counseling. Twice a week. I'm doing the parenting thing on Thursdays. A short laugh with nothing in it. It's mostly people much younger than me. That's good. I thought you would forgive me. I know. That stopped her. You know, you've always thought that. It was reasonable. I gave you 11 years of evidence. Melanie looked down at the table. Her wedding ring was gone, but the mark was still faintly there. Can't we start over? She said. I don't mean I know it's over. But as people. For Ruby. Can we be something? Adrian looked at her. No. Her eyes filled. I loved you, she said. Adrian nodded once. I loved you too. Then why can't you forgive me? His voice stayed calm. There was no edge on it. And that was what made it land. Because forgiveness isn't the same as trust. I can forgive you and still never let you near my life again. Those are 2 different doors, Melanie. One of them I might open someday. The other one is bricked up. She looked down. You'll never give me another chance? No. There was no anger in the answer. He did not say it to wound her. He said it the way you tell someone the store is closed. That made it hurt more than shouting would have. She sat with it, and her mouth trembled, and she pressed the back of her wrist against it. Adrian stood and pushed his chair in. I hope you become a good mother, he said. I mean that. do the counseling, do the program, show up on time to every single visit. She's worth it. Melanie looked up. And what about us? Adrian put his hand on the door and opened it. There is no us anymore. He walked out. The hallway was cold and smelled like radiator dust. He went down the stairs and out through the front doors into a bright, sharp March afternoon that made him squint. Ruby was waiting at the bottom of the steps with Denise, wearing the blue coat and a hat she refused to take off indoors or out. She saw him and ran. "Dad!" Adrian caught her under the arms and picked her up. She was heavier than she used to be. That was going to stop being possible soon, and he knew it, and he did it anyway. "Ready to go home?" She nodded against his shoulder. He set her down and thanked Denise, and the two of them walked toward the parking lot with her hand in his. "Dad." "Yeah. Are we still going fishing Saturday?" Adrian smiled. "Of course. Even if it rains? Especially if it rains. Fish don't care." She held his hand tighter and skipped a step to match his pace. For 2 years, Adrian had believed that the hardest part of working undercover was keeping secrets. Carrying something in your chest every day that you could not set down. Sitting at a table with people and letting them believe a smaller version of you. He had been wrong. The hardest part was discovering that the people closest to you could know everything about your heart. Every kindness, every Saturday morning, every night on the floor beside a child's bed, and still decide you were the one who should pay. But he had learned something else, and it had taken him until that March afternoon to put words to it. You do not have to destroy the people who betrayed you. You do not have to shout or threaten or spend years planning something clever. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is simply step out of the way and refuse to save them from the consequences they built with their own hands. Adrian unlocked the truck. Ruby climbed in and pulled her seatbelt across and told him about a girl in her class who had gotten a lizard. He drove them home through streets that were finally starting to green. For the first time in years, there was nothing to manage. No cover to maintain. No case file in a toolbox. No protecting Constance. No protecting Melanie. No pretending to be the small, quiet, disappointing man they had built in their heads and then handed to him to wear. Just Adrian and his daughter, and a wooden swing in a backyard that still creaked before dawn, and a life they could finally build without them.